Hello everyone, my name is Aretha. This is a short video to talk about 4 ways that we can practice self-care that have nothing to do with aesthetics. Let me start by saying that there's nothing wrong with aesthetics. Getting your hair done, getting pampered, doing a skincare routine are all important parts of self-care. But there's a lot of content on those topics, and I thought I would do a slightly different video. Before I talk about the 4 ideas, I also want to put out a disclaimer that self care videos are supposed to be about ways to make you feel good. So if you're watching self care content that makes you feel bad, makes you feel overwhelmed, or makes you feel like you don't measure up, stop watching it. There's a ton of advice on the internet, and it's your job to find out what works best for you. So if you see a 40-step beauty routine that feels like it's too much, then don't do it. And that goes for my videos also. I offer a lot of suggestions that are based on things that I've read or things that I've experienced myself, but they may not always work for you. So take everything I say and everything everybody else says with a grain of salt. You are the expert on you, and you get to filter out what doesn't work for you. That being said, let's talk about 4 ways we can practice self-care that have nothing to do with our looks. So my first suggestion is to identify activities that help calm down your nervous system. Here, I'd like you to kind of build a toolbox of things you can go to when you're feeling under pressure and you're going through the thick of things and you are going through an acute period of stress. A few great places to start include going outside, going for a walk, moving in some fun way, whether it's dancing or swinging on a swing set, skipping, listening to some music, meditating, journaling. We all have things that work well for us that we tend to go to relieve stress. And if you don't know what those things are for you, then the number one step for your self care is to learn what those are and put them in a mental toolbox that you can refer to when you need it. Also, consider activities that bring out your creativity, whether it's drawing, doodling, creating some form of art, music, whatever it is. Create your own mental list of things you will do the next time you feel really stressed out. My next suggestion is to think about adding an activity that helps you relieve stress on a regular basis. So the difference between this tip and the last is that the last tip was focused on an acute period of stress. You're already going through it, you're already feeling run down. This is a more preventive step where you add a regular activity to your calendar that allows you to release the stress from your body before it gets to the point where you're completely breaking down. Because whether you know it or not, we're always carrying stress within our body. There's always a certain amount of tension just as a result of the things we go through daily that is always present in our bodies. So, regularly releasing that stress will prevent it from accumulating to the point where we're literally break down. Exercise is a really good way to do this, but also having regular hobbies, talking to friends, making sure you watch a comedy show or do something that makes you laugh regularly. But when you look at your week and you look at how you spend your days, do you have activities where you are able to release all the tension that's in your body? And if you don't, make sure that becomes part of your regular routine. This will allow you to stay on top of things before they get completely out of control. And I want to point out that stress is not just caused by bad bosses and work and traffic. Stress could be stuff in your house, it could be relationships, it could be so many different ways that we feel challenged in our day to day. My next tip is to also include time to unwind and reset. So while the previous suggestion focused on more involved activities like exercise, hanging out with friends, and doing something actively, potentially around other people, this tip is about finding time just for yourself. And ideally, you would incorporate this into your regular routine so you would make time for it daily or at the very least a few times a week. And these activities might look like journaling, sitting in silence. Maybe it's drinking your coffee in complete silence for 5 minutes in the morning before you start your day. In this step, you want to focus on limiting outside stimulus so you can just be with yourself. And if the idea of doing nothing makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, remember that it doesn't have to be very long. 5 minutes of sitting in peace could do wonders for your brain and for your state of mind. So I mentioned meditation earlier, but I know that it can feel intimidating to some people. If so, I encourage you to look at different forms of meditation. There's a thing called a walking meditation, so you don't have to just sit and do nothing. There are many ways that you can get into a meditative state without necessarily sitting in the dark by yourself. One thing that helps me get into a really quiet meditative state is listening to the sound of rain. Something about the sound of rain just makes me calm all the way down and shuts down all my thoughts and allows me to just be. So I'll just sit with my cup of coffee and sigh deeply as I listen to the rain. And my last idea is to balance input with output. And that's a harder one for me to explain. Sometimes I feel like I'm completely depleted because I've done so much, I've been operating in high productive mode. Then I know that my outputs have been intense. So then I start thinking about how I can put back into myself. Do I need inspiration? Do I need time alone? Do I need to listen to something relaxing? How do I give back to myself in that moment? On the opposite end of that, sometimes I'm really energized. I watch all this content, I consume all these new ideas, and that tells me that I've had too much input. I've consumed all this information, but I haven't had a chance to go out there and do something with it. So now I have to look for ways to create an output. Maybe I look at one of the things I learned and think about ways I can implement it in my life. Maybe I need to stop consuming content for a little bit and just go about living my life and doing things. Maybe I need to create something. Maybe I want to take what I learned and create a video. Maybe I want to write a blog article. Maybe I just want to talk to a friend about it. But I'm constantly mindful of whether I'm feeling like I need more input or if I am saturated with input and I need to do something with it. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but let's say you take several days off or you're home because you're sick. And the first few days feel good because you get to unwind and watch TV. But after a week of watching TV, you start to feel uncomfortable, like you want to do something. Well, that's a clear example of having too much input and not enough output. Again, this will vary from person to person, but I think it's important to learn to listen to yourself so that you can understand if the discomfort you feel is because you've consumed too much or you've tried to produce too much. And balancing the two will help you feel better overall. But also understanding the distinction between the two will allow you to customize what you do with your self care in that moment. The idea is that we have a collection of tools that we can use as needed, but every tool doesn't solve every problem. That's why building a portfolio of potential activities is helpful because depending on what you need in the moment, you can pick the right tool. So, those are my suggestions for ways that we can think about incorporating self care that allows us to manage our energy and replenish ourselves on a deeper level. As always, I'm open to dialogue around this topic, so I would love to hear your suggestions for how you practice self care in the comments below. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.